never sleeps, pal.
I'm Pete Townsend, and this is our 8th episode of Money Never Sleeps, a podcast kindly sponsored by Top Tier Recruitment, a specialist recruitment consultancy in fintech and financial services. In this episode, we talk to Lisa White, the founder and CEO of Spireworks, a challenger consultancy with strong beliefs that organizations should be engaging, diverse, and purposeful for employees, customers, and shareholders alike. This was Owen's first time meeting Lisa, but she and I are collaborators and friends. I met one of Lisa's colleagues in 2016 when I was wandering around a fintech conference. She in turn introduced me to Lisa, and we immediately got on like a house on fire. To me, Lisa is a cultural change guru with a digital core and a time machine. She knows how the future of work is going to play out, and she's taking her clients there. Great Scott! On with the show. Hey everyone, welcome to the 8th episode of Money Never Sleeps. We're here in Dogpatch Labs in Dublin. I'm Pete Townsend.
And I'm Owen Fitzgerald.
And we're here with Lisa White, who I've described to people as a cultural change guru for the digital world. Ooh. Say hi, Lisa.
Hi, everyone.
Great to have you here. Thanks for coming on. So we'd like to start with you telling us a bit about yourself, a bit about your business, Spireworks. You're the founder of Spireworks, a consulting business here in Dublin, which is a different type of consulting business.
It is.
That I think, knowing you and working with you, that is very much tied to who Lisa White is. So
Yep.
maybe share with us.
All right. So you've introduced me nicely. Thank you very much, Pete. I am Irish, originally, let's say, but I'm probably the only Irish girl in Dublin that feels a little bit like an expat. So I really feel like I've just blown back in after, I think I was out of the country 16 years. Most of my professional experiences outside of Ireland. And I did found Spireworks in Ireland in 2016 when I came back, but having run a Swiss business, or out of Switzerland anyway, working for global clients since 2014. So I'm fairly new, relatively new to the entrepreneurship scene. And you're dead right, Spireworks is a company that is intimately tied with my values. So the whole goal of the company is to create an ecosystem of individuals and partner companies that work together to change the way organizations operate. So I'm fascinated by the way we come together in groups of people in whatever form, whether it be in a bank or at a school or in a university or in a government, to get stuff done together. And honestly, I'm quite shocked at how wasteful those organizations are, and how painful that process can be, and how miserable everybody seems to be at work and at school or at university or within whatever system that we're talking about. And so the whole goal of this ecosystem was to bring together people with values like honesty and integrity and really audacity to challenge the way things are done today and do it differently. Yeah.
A wise person once said, "The world is more malleable than you think, and it's just waiting for you to hammer it into shape."
I hope so.
Is that what you're doing?
I hope that's true. So I my confidence goes up and down on a daily basis, as I'm sure every entrepreneur does. But maybe I've been bitten by the female Irish born and bred Catholic bug that makes me feel a lot more guilty and shameful than I should. But I'm constantly questioning, is this possible or is it not? And I go through days where, I think the world can be changed, absolutely, and we all have the power to do it. And the next day, quite easily, could be the opposite. So I hope it's true.
And do you think your international experience, is it an Irish thing? Because I would find that, I don't know, do we just not try change things? Do we just accept things the way they are, or is that an international thing that you find everywhere?
That's a good question. I think the right and full answer to that is much more nuanced than maybe I'm capable of giving now. But I think there is a certain complacency in Irish culture that's always frustrated me. So there's an acceptance of the status quo that I found before I left, and it's one of the reasons I decided to leave for university. So I left the country 2001 to go to the UK for university. And it's something that I found since I've come back. But there's also, and that is present in other cultures, don't get me wrong, but if you look at the American culture, for example, Pete, there's such bolshiness and just risk taking and let's go for it, let's try something. And there's a lot I think that Irish people and maybe Europeans in general can learn from that. But I also think there's a huge positive in Irish culture that's an opportunity for us here to create a bouncing off position or a kind of a staging environment for changing the rest of the world. We care a little bit less than many people in Europe and even some people in the US or in the East, certainly in the East, about what people think of us. We kind of just get on with stuff, and if we make a mistake or cock something up, we make it into a joke and move forward. There's huge power in that, because particularly when you're an entrepreneur, and particularly when your goal is to change the world, which is a bit of a big goal, right? You're going to fail. So being able to deal with those knockbacks and go and have a pint or have a laugh with your friends, and the ability to do that is special. And that the other countries in Europe that I've been in haven't had that capability.
And from your point of view, then, what have you failed with, I suppose, and how have you gotten past that?
Oh, loads of failures. So on some of the questions that you'd fired over to me beforehand, there was one in there about my biggest strengths and my biggest weaknesses, or the characteristics that have contributed to positives and negatives, I guess, of my business, but also of my professional life. And I have one big, easy answer to that for both of those questions, because it's the same answer. And I think it's that's led to all of the mistakes I've made. I'm a super emotional person, and I love it and I hate it. And my clients and the people I work with love it and hate it. So it means I expose a huge amount of passion and authenticity. And, when I ask other people, what am I good at? That's what they say. You're passionate, the enthusiasm that you bring, the rallying people around an idea you can achieve that very, very, very well, very powerfully. But that means that, there's something raw out there that can be damaged and destroyed every time you make a mistake. And sometimes it's putting myself out there that much that is my biggest failing.
Finding that can be hard, right? You've had a big influence on me in the way that what I've become over the last couple of years, where it's just like, be yourself, right? And if you can bring your whole self to work, right, and that it's just your life, right. I kind of recognized the point in time where that changed for me and how things have accelerated for me since then. Was there a point in time where you kind of came out of your shell? Was there something that kind of said, listen, screw it, I'm just going to be myself. I'm just going to do this, and people are going to either love it or hate it. And the ones that love it, great, I'm going to get to work with them. The ones that don't,
screw it.
Exactly.
Well, first, thank you for it's nice to know that I've had an impact on your life.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I'm not sure that there's one single moment, but there is a series of moments that I've had throughout my career where I feel like I have decided to reveal more and more of my whole self. So there were, I've had a bumpy time, particularly the last 3 years. But if I cast my mind back to the first time that I would have come out, for example, within a professional environment, I grew up in the corporate world, so I'm relatively new to this entrepreneurship thing. I spent many years in consulting, many years in big financial services companies, and I would have been constantly encouraged to separate business and personal. Constantly encouraged, don't talk about your relationship. You don't want to be seen as a gay woman. No, never mind just the woman thing, a gay woman, or you can't talk about that in the office. And it meant that I created this barrier that really, maybe that was my biggest mistake. Maybe that was something that kind of destroyed some of the potential emotional vulnerability that makes me good at what I do now. And I think maybe that was the first click way back in maybe 2012, which was when I decided to leave big consulting to go and join a client. But since then, there's been people that I've met along the way that have really challenged my belief that things have to be hidden or things have to be private or you're not supposed to air your dirty laundry in public. And for each of those people, and there's been so many, Pete, you're one of them yourself, right? Everyone has had, that little bit that they've scratched at and said, well, what happens if you do reveal this? And so what? So what if some people are are pissed off about it. You know, so for example, I work with a colleague now, and I've worked with him for a decade now, both as a client of mine, as my boss for a while, and now as a business partner. And he would have been, I think for 8 years, he pushed me on you have to work anytime, any hour of the day. If I call you at 4 p.m. or even 4 a.m. on a Saturday night when, you know, let's be honest, I'm out drinking.
Yeah.
But he expected me to be available. And I work when there's work to be done. Like at the minute, I'm finding myself doing 18-hour days. But if I need time off, I need time off. And that's okay. That's a human requirement to rest sometimes. And just finding my voice to kind of push back on that and set a boundary, I think was, a smaller example of one of those moments where I get to reveal myself. But I'm still revealing myself. Like I'm not totally my whole self at work yet. I'm trying, but I'm getting there.
How does it work the best? What is the most successful approach for you in terms of the 100% authenticity, transparency? Here I am in a professional setting. That means your business grows. You know, what maybe an example of something that you're kind of looking at and say, well, that might have been the turning point where translating this into a value proposition became really successful for you.
Mm-hmm. I kind of feel that with Spireworks, I'm having multiple breakthrough moments to that effect. So, and all of them can be tied back to one thing in me. And it shocks me how much this comes back to how I see myself, my own mental health, because it's all about how I trust myself. If I trust something that I believe in, a strategy, a direction, a particular product, or a direction that I'm going with the business. And if I just go with that and stop listening to the naysayers for a little while, I normally have a breakthrough. And I'm constantly in the peaks and troughs of that at the moment. So every time I have a moment in my life where I'm like, screw this, I'm going to trust this perspective and just go with it for the next 3 months. I always have a breakthrough, always.
I find this fascinating actually, because obviously I wouldn't know you from before, but Pete had kind of spoken to me about you, and I find that in all the places I've worked, because I've worked in a number of different places now, and like to me the best version of myself, I suppose, from a work point of view was when I worked in a startup for Brian Norton. He was our first guest, but I can't stop myself from putting everything I have into something. But I find that the flip side is that then, like, if it doesn't work out, then it is that peaks and troughs. But there's no just turning up and punching in. I give everything, and I get involved in parts of my work that are outside of my remit or whatever. But I still do, because I want to drive like the wider place that I work. But the flip side is then that when there's downs, and you question wanting to continue working there, because it's just I can't step back from it. I find. When it sounds like you're in the same kind of way.
Absolutely the same. It's every day of my life I'm trying to learn how do I ride those peaks and troughs of emotion, because I've done the shut down the emotion, be the professional self, put on the mask. I used to wear suits and really clothes that I'm not wearing today, and now I'll turn up in jeans and a relaxed shirt, just as a way to force myself to be me, because I just think I get a lot more out of life and of my work if I invest all of myself, and so does everybody else around me. So I'll just take those lows. I'll weather that storm to get back to the good. And
is that as much part then of what you're offering by working with companies? Because obviously large companies, that part of people is to be hidden. It's you turn up and do your job, but it's not like that's not how the world works. That's not how people work.
Not today. No. So if you look at the latest Gallup polls, something like 13% of the global workforce is engaged at work, which leaves a good 80% of people around the world, of workers around the world, either miserable or indifferent. They just don't care. They come in, they clock in, and then they clock out at 5 o'clock or whatever it might be. Think of the human potential wasted there for the individual, for themselves. How how demoralizing that must feel, never mind for the business. Imagine what we could achieve if we could tap into that human creativity and engagement and motivation. Imagine how much happier the world would be. That needs to go hand in hand, for the record, with teaching people or learning together how to weather those storms, and remembering that you need to go through the storm in order to appreciate the high, right? You need to taste something nasty in order to appreciate the sweet, And
I suppose, I find that whole area fascinating, because a lot of what I read and what I've always been interested in is around because I'm background is in finance, but it's around the behavioral side of it, and that to me is the key, and it's tapping into a person's potential. When I saw there was a really good clip on LinkedIn, and it was just a 30-minute clip of a person with their child, and they sat down and they just drew a line, and they marked on that line that person's age, and they were showing their child how much of their entire life gets taken up with where they're working, and there's up to 18, and from 65 onwards, 2 small portions of your life, and this whole bit in the middle is working in some shape or form, and it's about why people make decisions and all this sort of stuff. I just find that area fascinating, and it's just not something that is taken, especially in a large organisation. It's not the lowest thing that's considered. Right.
And we live in an era now where certainly the generation behind me, maybe even my generation, expect their work to be something engaging, something purposeful that they care about, that they love to do, and that they'll get support to do. And so, increasingly what I see is that traditional organisations, whether they be public sector or corporations or something in between, don't appeal to that generation. So I'm seeing certainly my colleagues or people younger than me leaving corporate jobs to go and do something that they think is much more meaningful, whatever that might be. Maybe it's grinding coffee beans and making good Irish coffee, or maybe it's doing something like this, becoming an entrepreneur, starting a startup. And the work that Spireworks does with those big traditional conservative organizations is normally folks buy us because they think they need to do something digital, or they think they need to do something innovative, or you've got your honestly normally middle-aged white males realizing that they need to maybe change the way that their organization works to start to appeal to these folks, or to start to do things online, because this millennial generation is supposed to want to do things online. And we go in with that kind of a specific and tangible and technical mandate often. And the way that we then evolve culture is by subterfuge. It's by influence. It's by interacting with people in a different way. It's by leading a project from a position of vulnerability rather than a position of authority. And it's that starts to make people question themselves and what they're doing and why they're doing it. And
yeah, I got one of those yesterday. Frequently, I have people reach out to me in the industry, in financial services that know me and say, Pete, I'm thinking about a career change. Can you come listen to me and try to help me out? And typically what I get is I try to find out, does this person have any entrepreneurial inertia in them, either outright or hidden? And if they do, I try to tease it out, encourage it in one direction. If I can find that they don't, it's like, okay, well, what can you do within your current organization that will allow you to thrive and allow you to really do well? And there are the ups and downs. 2 completely different experiences within 2 hours yesterday. The first guy I talked to, he was at the Adminovate conference that we did back in January, where Lisa spoke on the future of work quite brilliantly as well. And he was so inspired, which was the point of Adminovate, to show people in the funds industry that there's a lot more out there, that look at all this wonderful fintech and regtech that's being built. He was so inspired to go look at it. He did. And then when it got to the point where he had a proposal for his boss to suggest that they look deeper at some of these providers, boss was like, forget about it. They're too small. How could we possibly work with a small tech company? We need big, huge ones, right? Following that meeting, I had lunch with a pal who knows nothing about some of the things I'm passionate about with distributed ledger technologies, and I was trying to tell him about the Consensus launch here in Dublin. He's like, "What's Consensus?" Talking about Ethereum, he's like, "What's Ethereum?" He is building his platform in such a way, without knowing any of this stuff that's going on with distributed ledgers or any of the new technology that's coming along in the marketplace, he's building it in such a way that he'll be able to fit on top of all that. And that's just his vision. And he kind of knows where the future is and where things are going from his very small industry. I said, dude, what do you read? He's like, I read about the funds industry. That's it. So somehow he's plugged in and he's got a vision of where he wants to go. This other guy is being discouraged to go in a certain direction. And it's just, I still find it somewhat surprising, yet not astonishingly surprising, that we can have such polarity really out there in the corporate world between those that are encouraged to go on and do things and to find their vision and find the way that they want to lead, and others that are told, hey, just go back into your corner. Do you have experience with kind of helping people through that and helping uncover this stuff?
Absolutely, absolutely. So I think what that story illustrates really nicely is that regardless of who you work for, where you work, what you do, how big your company is, your real experience at work is about the people that you interact with. It's about your boss and your colleagues and how supportive they are and how ready they are to take a bet on you or trust you if you propose something that might be a little bit risky or innovative, or and so within some very traditional organizations, some people can have a fantastic time because they have a fantastic boss or colleague or supportive environment. And really, so the work that I do, so I used to be a big IT program manager. So you think hundreds of millions of dollars worth of a program, implementing solutions over 3, 5, 8 years, and usually you get to the end of that program and you think, well, that technology is just a little bit too little, too late. It's past it. The customers have changed. The market has changed. Instead, now everything that we do takes advantage of that almost ripple effect. That if I do something really small that just impacts this one person or this small team or this small piece of data or this little bit of technology, it'll have a little knock-on effect that will very quickly become an exponential impact on the corporation or the organization, rather than trying to plan out in this monstrosity of a program every little change that you want to make, and talk about that in the context of the whole organization, which is beyond our order of understanding or our order of visualization as humans. And that's the way that we always engage with organizations. So we take that one person that we're engaging with or that has brought us in, or that one project or that one piece of technology that they want, and we make a little change to it. And a little change after that. And each one allows us to learn something and evolve the way that we're doing things and honestly impact a greater number of people. That's how change is going to work in the future.
And it's funny because to me, like it wasn't even a great movie, but one of the things that stuck with me about it was the movie. It had Kevin Spacey in it, Pay It Forward. And it's about a kid who just starts doing good things for people. I think that was what it was called.
What was his name? He was in I See Dead People.
Yeah. And but the whole
kid,
Haley Joel Osment.
Okay.
The kid
I have
was
a
big on
vague recollection of that movie.
It's not a great, but the idea was great because, from a working point of view, my first job was with an AIB, but I worked for a guy named Seamus McGrath. I think he's a director in PwC now. I'm very good friends with, but he had just come in from outside of AIB, so he had an approach to work, and I was a grad. I worked with him, but he used to bring me to anything and everything, to expose me to everything. And I was to the point that people would question, why am I being brought to senior meetings? But again, for him, it was let him learn as much as he can. And that's always stuck with me. And I worked with the grads down at Enterprise Ireland, and I've worked with grads before, and it's always been that sometimes it's just that one person that it'll stick with, and when they go on to their next job, that maybe they'll take the same approach and they'll help someone else. And because the frustration is working in larger corporations is trying to make a change to a big beast of a place that you can't do, but maybe bit by bit through a person that it'll flow from there. It's
about not looking at that whole problem of changing an organization or even changing a society, because that's too big to conceive of, and it will immediately demotivate you to inertia. It's about taking that one person that you can change, or that one little impact that you can have, and you're right, very, very quickly that can have a knock-on effect throughout not just that one individual's life, but every individual that they encounter. Absolutely.
Yeah, I've been out there preaching lately, believe it or not, and when I talk to big businesses, particularly in financial services, I am completely influenced by Clayton Christensen in the Innovator's Dilemma, and that with the inertia of big organizations, they need to improve, they need to become more efficient, they need to put their programs in place to get better and reduce costs. But I think digital transformation is a myth, right? Transforming an entire organization, if you undertake 3 years of a program and spend X billion, by the end of the 3 years...
It's too late. Yeah. What you've done is old. It's legacy.
Exactly.
It's finished. Yeah.
It's moved, 3 months in to your 3-year program. So start new. Start like a startup would. And cordon off a little part of the business.
Yep.
And focus on that and see if you can scale that. If not, fail. Fail fast, move on. You've taken an option. You've spent $500,000, right?
And that doesn't mean you don't have an overarching strategy.
Exactly.
But it means that you have to look at strategy as an adaptive concept. Kind of a rough vision that you paint on the wall in the beginning and that you change as you learn things through this incremental project activity. And Owen, so you mentioned grads. This is very much a related topic and close to my heart. I hate the way that corporates look at new employees, particularly graduates. So I was abhorred by one of my recent clients in the way that they interacted with their graduates and spoke of them like that they were little pieces of the machine that they just had to plug in and shove in a corner, and spoke of them like they were little useless ants really on a farm. And we have so much to learn from the previous generation. I think we don't acknowledge that enough, that we don't just get to learn from people who are older than ourselves or more experienced than ourselves, but we get to learn from people who are not, because in some respects that naivety allows them to ask questions and poke around with the status quo and do things a little bit differently and run those kinds of startup style projects a little bit differently that a seasoned professional wouldn't be able for. And that is the kind of culture that I strive to create in all of the clients that I work with. Slowly but surely, one person at a time, but that kind of openness to learning from everything. And the only way you can do that is incrementally. That is not a big bang.
Think of the best day you've had in the last month. How do you make that part of every day?
Trust myself.
Yeah?
I don't do that enough. I don't know if other entrepreneurs, if other entrepreneurs have that issue, but so best day I've had in the last month was maybe a week or so ago. All of the stars aligned. So I've had a rough year. My dad's been sick and he passed away then shortly after that. Business has been bumpy. All of a sudden I'd closed 2 massive projects. My other half had taken some time off and we were getting on like a house on fire. And we all of a sudden decided to foster 7 cats. So my house is chaos, but I love it.
A cat lady before your time.
Yeah, I know. Don't even go there. But it's just, I love when all of those things happen at once. All of my buses come at once and life becomes chaos. That's when I thrive, excuse me. How do I make that common? I'm not sure I can make it every day, because if I don't have those down days, like I said, I don't appreciate the up days. But I do think it comes down to trusting myself. If I trust myself and throw myself into, honestly, usually the biggest and most innovative risks, I normally do okay. My clients do okay out of it, and my friends and family do okay out of it. I don't do that enough.
Yeah, I step back and say, what would Pete do? Right. I step back from myself and pretend that I've already been successful at the thing that I'm worried about, and say, how did I do it? How would I do it?
You're damn good at this stuff, though, Pete. You're really good at self-talk and self-motivation. That's one thing very much that I've got from you the last couple of years that we've known each other. So
I've got some help with that at home called my wife.
I'm sure.
Okay, I think we've come natural kind of coming to an end, and the question we love asking our guests is, what's something unexpected that people wouldn't know about you? I mean, we usually chip in something ourselves. most people don't know that I have any tattoos of any kind. I have had a number. I got my first one when I was 15 in what used to be, or I think is still there. It used to be a tattoo parlor. It's now a sex shop on Georgia Street, Miss Fantasia.
Miss Fantasia. I got my first tattoo there as well. Yeah.
I was 15. My parents knew nothing about it, but I have a number of them, but just not anywhere that people would see them. So no one tends to know that. But that's my story.
Nice one. Okay, well, everybody knows I have tattoos, so I can't use that one. The one that comes to mind maybe isn't as funny as your sex story one. I suffer a lot from anxiety, a lot of issues, and I have done my whole life. So it's something that medical professionals have tagged the title of depression on. They've tagged generalized anxiety disorder. They've tagged some personality disorders. None of them have stuck, so it's not like I have any kind of a diagnosis. But I constantly struggle with self-belief and self-motivation. And it does mean that I have those extreme lows, but it also means that when I bounce back, I bounce high. So it's kind of it's a positive and a negative, and it's not something that I talk about very regularly. So I'm not sure everybody knows that about me.
Well, everyone, I think you can look at some things and some qualities of the way they portray themselves and the way they kind of get out there. And, people can sometimes tend to put a label on it, but sometimes it's just you being you. And people are different, and that's who they are, and they go through certain experiences in different ways.
Yep.
And there are plenty of skeletons in my closet.
We all have skeletons.
That's for next week.
Yeah, exactly. So Lisa, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Much.
It's been inspiring, as always, to chat with you. So thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks.
Money never sleeps, pal.
We'd like to thank Lisa for opening up her mind for the 8th episode of Money Never Sleeps, a podcast brought to you by Owen Fitzgerald and me, Pete Townsend, and sponsored by Top Tier Recruitment. We're now on iTunes, so please subscribe and leave us a review. Also, check out our website for more, moneyneversleeps.ie, or drop us a line on info@moneyneversleeps.ie. We'd also like to thank Gav Timlin and Conan Brophy from Create Sound for recording and editing this podcast. Finally, thanks to Dogpatch Labs for hosting us and for their unwavering support of the startup community in Dublin. Till next time, see ya!